For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople stood where empires went to die. Armies came from the east and west. Kings promised its fall. Prophets predicted its destruction. And every single time the city survived, massive walls guarded it. The sea protected it. Faith wrapped around it like armor. Constantinople was not just a city, it was an idea. It was the last living shadow of Rome. People believed it was chosen by God Himself. That belief made it feel eternal, untouchable, unbreakable. But in the year 1453, something changed. Not in the walls, not in the weapons, but in the balance of the world. On the throne of a rising empire sat a young ruler, only 21 years old, ambitious, intelligent, obsessive. His name was Mehmed, and he wanted one thing above all else: Constantinople. For Mehmed, this was not just conquest, it was destiny. He had studied the city, its walls, its history, its failures and near falls. He knew every previous siege had failed for one main reason: the walls always held. So he decided not to fight the city the old way. He would break it, slowly, relentlessly, from the outside and the inside. Inside Constantinople, things were already fragile. The Byzantine Empire was a ghost of its former self, once stretching across continents, now reduced to a city and a few scattered lands. The population had collapsed. Entire neighborhoods stood empty. Churches echoed with prayers of fear rather than confidence. Emperor Constantine XI knew the truth. Help would not come. Western Europe promised aid, but sent almost nothing. Old religious divisions poisoned alliances. Constantinople was alone. Still, Constantine refused to flee. He refused to surrender. He chose to stand and die with his city. When the Ottoman army arrived, it was unlike anything the world had seen before. Tens of thousands of soldiers, elite janissaries, cavalry, engineers. But the most terrifying sight was not the men, it was the cannons. Giant weapons forged specifically for this siege. One cannon in particular dwarfed everything, so massive it took dozens of oxen to move. Its purpose was simple: to do what no army had done before: break the walls of Constantinople. When the first cannon fired, the ground shook, stone cracked, a sound thundered across the city that no living soul had ever heard. The walls that had stood for centuries began to crumble. Panic spread. Repairs were made every night. Men worked with bare hands, filling gaps with rubble and wood. Each morning the cannons spoke again. The siege was no longer symbolic. It was mechanical, industrial, unstoppable. The sea offered no escape. Men had ordered ships dragged over land, over hills, on greased logs. When dawn came, Byzantine defenders looked out and froze. Ottoman ships now floated inside the Golden Horn, a place thought impossible to reach. The city was surrounded. Faith began to crack. Priests prayed. Citizens wept. Some believed this was punishment. Others believed this was prophecy being fulfilled. Constantine walked the walls daily, encouraging soldiers, sharing their exhaustion. He was not a distant emperor. He was a man among men, and he knew time was running out. Every day the walls weakened. Every night morale fell. Mehmed watched patiently. He did not rush. He tightened the noose, and then he prepared for the final assault. Dawn broke over Constantinople on May 29, 1453. But this was not a sunrise of hope. It was the moment history exhaled for the last time. Smoke still clung to the shattered walls. Cannons stood hot and silent after a night of endless fire. and inside the city, exhaustion had reached something deeper than fear. Emperor Constantine XI knew the truth that morning. There would be no reinforcements, no miracle, no last-minute salvation from the West. The city had been reduced to a test of endurance, and endurance had run out. As the Ottoman army prepared for the final assault, Mehmed II stood calm, almost cold, fully aware that centuries of history were about to end under his command. He had learned from every failed attack, every crack in the walls, every moment of hesitation. This time, there would be no retreat. The first wave advanced at dawn, irregular troops thrown forward like a living battering ram. Their purpose was not victory, but exhaustion. They ran toward the breaches, screaming, climbing over rubble, dying by the hundreds, forcing the defenders to fire, swing swords, and waste their last strength. Inside the city, arrows flew, boiling oil was poured, stones were dropped, and bodies piled high against the broken walls. The Byzantines fought with desperation, knowing that every minute they survived delayed the inevitable, but did not change it. After hours of chaos, the first wave collapsed, exactly as Mehmed had planned. Then came the second wave, trained Anatolian troops pushing harder, more organized, more dangerous. The defenders were bleeding now, arms shaking, eyes burning, movements slowing. The walls no longer protected them, they trapped them. Then finally, Mehmed unleashed the Janissaries, elite, disciplined, silent. This was the moment the city truly fell. Near the gate of St. Romanus, a cannon blast widened an already broken section of the wall. Janissaries poured through like a black tide. At the same time, a small gate, the Kirka Porta, was found open or left unguarded in the chaos. Ottoman soldiers slipped inside. The impossible had happened. The city was breached from within. Emperor Constantine XI did not flee. When he realized the city was lost, he removed his imperial insignia and charged into the fighting like an ordinary soldier. No one knows exactly how he died. His body was never conclusively identified. The last Roman emperor vanished into the crowd, swallowed by the collapse of his world. As Ottoman forces flooded the streets, organized defense disintegrated. Churches became refuges, then prisons. Hagia Sophia, filled with thousands of civilians, praying, crying, begging for salvation that never came. When Ottoman soldiers broke through the doors, the sound of prayer was replaced by screams. According to contemporary accounts, Mehmed II entered the city later that day, riding slowly, observing the destruction with measured control. He ordered the killing to stop, claiming the city as his prize. When he entered Hagia Sophia, he paused, scooped dust from the ground, and poured it over his turban as a sign of humility before God. The greatest church in Christendom became a mosque, not by accident, but by intention. Constantinople was no longer Roman, no longer Byzantine. It was Ottoman. The fall of the city sent shockwaves across Europe. Bells rang in mourning. Kings panicked. Scholars fled west, carrying ancient Greek manuscripts that would help ignite the Renaissance. Trade routes shifted. The medieval world cracked. For the Ottomans, this was not just a victory. It was a declaration. Mehmed II became Mehmed the Conqueror, a ruler who proved that age, tradition, and legend could be crushed by preparation, patience, and ambition. Constantinople was rebuilt, repopulated, and transformed into Istanbul, the beating heart of an empire that would dominate for centuries. But the fall was more than a military event. It was the symbolic death of Rome itself, an empire that had survived barbarians, plagues, civil wars, and betrayal finally fell to cannons and calculation. The city that once called itself eternal learned the harshest truth of history: nothing is immune to time. And as the sun set on May 29th, 1453, the world entered a new era, forged not by prophecy, but by force.